Hello and welcome to Cover, our semi-regular review of sporting books where I give you my opinion of what's on the bookshelves at the moment. As usual, if you'd like to get in touch with us, we would love to hear from you. There is the email address. It is sean.everett@supersport.com. If you'd like to feedback on what I've been saying, and many of you have, thank you very much. Or if you've got a book that you would like us to review, then please do get in contact. And we really do thank you for the feedback. It's allowed us to broaden our scope of books covered, one of which is today's book, They Made Headlines. Don Nelson, who wrote and published this, he got in touch with us having watched some editions of Cover to Cover and said, here's one for you. So thanks very much, Don. It's available from all leading bookstores, particularly Exclusive Books and Bargain Books, and it's retailing at 249 Rand. Now, Don is a veteran of the local sports publishing industry. Here's just a couple from my collection. Many of you might know this one if you're a rugby fan. Springbok Saga by Chris Gravenstein. Absolutely key book when I'm writing historical pieces on the Springboks, as is this one, The Chosen. Also a Don Nelson publication, and that's by the late, great Paul Dobson and Andy Cahoon. I'm happy to say is still with us. As it happens, extracts from both of those books feature in They Made Headlines, which is a compendium of sports writing covering some of the major sports stars in South Africa over the last 60 years. And within these pages, you can read about Basil D'Oliveira and Karen Muir, Caster Semenya, Frick du Preez, Zola Budd, the racehorse Sea Cottage, and many more. It's comparable in many ways to one of the very first books that we reviewed on Cover to Cover, this one, Vuvuzela Dawn, which is still in your shops now. A really fine read, Vuvuzela Dawn. The difference for this one that was written by Luke Alfred and Ian Hawkey is that it concentrates on the post-isolation stories, whereas They Made Headlines casts its net wider and into the bad old days of apartheid. And as such, it might be beyond the pale for some readers, in which case I should just point you to the title, which is They Made Headlines. That is the raison d'etre for this book. And it is political at times, particularly when dealing with the likes of D'Oliveira and Budd. But I left with the impression that this is a sports book for sports people. And that's the reason that I'm reviewing it here on Cover to Cover. The book has been assembled by Don from a variety of sources, but principally books from his own publishing stable, including the original They Made Headlines, written by Chris Gravenstein in 1972, and that was purely about Springbok rugby players, 12 of them, and this new book uses 4 of those stories, Frick du Preez, H.O. de Villiers, Jannie Engelbrecht and Tiny Nordier, largely as they first appeared. And that brings us to the contradiction at the core of the book, which I think is its greatest strength and weakness, the authorial voice. Don has, I think correctly, largely avoided updating or rewriting the pre-1990 tales, which means that the heroes of them inhabit a much simpler world than our post-COVID dystopia. Jannie Engelbrecht, running at night in the Tuileries Gardens in Paris, is trying to prove his fitness. He's not trying to get away from anti-apartheid protesters. Frick du Preez isn't that perfect player who never had a bad game and was honoured as the rugby player of the 20th century in South Africa. He is instead the gifted, and in the eyes of many of his contemporaries, lazy maverick. Ravenstein's storytelling is tight, well observed, and it inhabits an entirely different universe from the one of Siya Kolisi. That's a universe wherein the mere idea that a black man might play for the Springboks, never mind captain them, is simply unthinkable. The Kolisi chapter draws from a number of different sources, and it stops before the Springboks left for Japan. It hangs together because it's largely quote-driven, and in that respect, it's superior to the chapter on Gary Player, which offers little insight and comes across as a Wikipedia biography. And so you'll get what I'm talking about when I say the change in the authorial voice. The book is at its best when it has that strong authorial presence. The opening chapter on Josiah Tagwani is a case in point. Story of our marathon gold medalist from the Atlanta Olympics is told as a whatever happened to tale. We get the high of winning and the low of having nothing but a faded tracksuit to show for it. Written by an American, Mike Wise, reprinted with permission from Runner's World, it allows us to see ourselves as others see us, and it is not a pretty picture. The chapter on Ernie Els winning his first major, the US Open at Oakmont in 1994, is also largely non-South African. Don credits three sources: Rick Riley of Sports Illustrated, AP, and Wikipedia. But it's Riley's voice that comes across loud and clear. No South African writer would describe the playoff with Colin Montgomery and Lauren Roberts as the movie version of how to line up your fourth putt with a few scenes of misery thrown in. It's a fascinating, with the benefit of hindsight, look to see how Els appeared to Americans at the time. Here he is before they took him to their hearts and called him the Big Easy. But even in 1994, Curtis Strange was able to say of Els, "I think I just played with the next god." Els himself is quoted as saying, "I hope I can handle it. I don't want to let it change me." And again, with the benefit of hindsight, we're able to say he could and it didn't. Ultimately, They Made Headlines is a classic curate's egg. Good in parts, it lacks the consistently fine writing of Vuvuzela Dawn, but it casts its net wider and it offers insights that arrive by stealth from left field, as it were. It's not the kind of book that you sit down and devour. It's more akin to a bowl of snacks to be enjoyed between other tasks, and it has more than enough charm to earn 7 out of 10. That's it for now. Thanks for watching, and try not to catch the third wave.